You know, in the tech world, you see a lot of updates. Small tweaks, new features, but every now and then, something gets completely reborn. That's exactly what we're talking about today. We're diving into a landmark moment in database history, the release of SQL Server 2017. This was the year that a tool used by millions completely changed the game.
For decades, you just knew what SQL Server was. It had its rules, its own little box it lived in. And then 2017 happened. And, well, it just smashed right through those rules. This wasn't your typical version 16 to version 17 update. No way. It was a total reinvention of what the thing even was. And maybe even more important, who could now use it. We're talking about a genuine transformation here.
All right, so what was the first and, let's be honest, the biggest rule to get broken? Well, it was the one thing that had defined SQL Server since day one. For its entire life, SQL Server and Windows were inseparable. You couldn't have one without the other. But in 2017, yeah, that all went out the window.
I mean, you really can't overstate how massive this was. Think about it. For decades, it was this powerful engine, but it was locked inside this one-walled garden, the Windows ecosystem. Then, boom! After 2017, it's cross-platform, it's out in the wild. And this wasn't just some cool tech demo, it was a huge strategic move. Microsoft was basically saying, okay, we're tearing down our own walls to play in the much bigger open world of Linux and containers.
And just look at what that one change unlocked. All of a sudden, you could run SQL Server on Linux. You could stick it in a Docker container. For any modern dev team, this was an absolute game changer. It meant SQL Server was finally ready for the cloud, you know? It made things like CI/CD pipelines so much simpler. It was suddenly a real player in a world where, before this, it wasn't even allowed in the game.
Okay, so running in new places was huge, but the transformation didn't stop there. SQL Server also got, well, a lot smarter. It was like it grew a brain, an intelligence that was baked right into the database engine itself.
And this new brain had a name: adaptive query processing. Now that sounds super technical, right? But the idea behind it is actually pretty simple and, frankly, kind of beautiful. Just imagine a database that's smart enough to watch itself run. It sees a query that's taking way too long, figures out why it's slow, and then it just fixes it automatically. The next time it runs, it's faster. It literally learns from its own mistakes.
So how does this actually work? Well, it's like a constant feedback loop. A query runs, and the database engine is watching. It's observing the performance. If it spots a problem with the execution plan, and you can think of the execution plan as the GPS directions the query follows to get the data, it doesn't just stick with the bad route. It actually corrects it, right then and there. So the very next time you run that same query, poof, it's already using the better, faster path. It's a system that just keeps getting smarter on its own.
And this whole adaptive intelligence thing was part of a much bigger push for a smarter database. It used something called the query store, which is basically like a black box flight recorder for your database's performance, to make all these corrections happen. And we also got other brilliant features, like resumable online index rebuilds. Now this was a lifesaver for DBAs. Seriously. Before this, if you were rebuilding a massive index and it failed when it was 90% done, you had to start all over again from zero. Now, you could just pause it and pick up right where you left off. The amount of time and stress that saved, just incredible.
So let's recap. SQL Server can now run anywhere, and it's smart enough to tune itself. That's already a massive change, right? But the story doesn't end there. The transformation also expanded what you could do with it, the kinds of problems you could solve. It was moving way beyond just rows and columns.
And what this did was open the doors to a whole new crowd of people. For instance, it added native graph database support. This was huge for analysts trying to map out complex networks. Think about social media connections or tracking down fraud rings. And then, it integrated Python, the language of data science, right inside the database. That was like rolling out the red carpet for data scientists, telling them, hey, come on in. You can build and run your machine learning models right here next to the data.
So when you step back and look at all these pieces together, it runs anywhere. It thinks for itself, and it can solve all these new kinds of problems. You realize what's really happened. This wasn't just a series of updates. SQL Server had a complete and total identity crisis, in the best possible way.
And this quote just nails it. With the 2017 release, SQL Server stopped being just a database. It became a true data platform, a single, unified place where developers could develop, analysts could analyze, and data scientists could do their science. Everyone was invited to the party. And that really leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it?
Making that leap from a specialized tool to an all-encompassing platform, that's a huge evolution. It really makes you wonder, once you've become the platform, what's next? What's the next frontier after that?